Dating back 1400 years ago, following the demise of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his initial successors, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, may Allah be pleased with them, did not document a single page of Islamic history. Why? Because there was absolutely no necessity to write it down. The vast majority of the companions and Sahaba were still alive, and they already possessed first-hand vivid knowledge of Islam's entire journey. However, as time ticked away and the Sahaba gradually departed from this world, the newer generations of Muslims began losing touch with their roots, slowly forgetting the epic clashes of Badr, Uhud, and Khandaq. Shockingly, some young minds even began sidelining Islamic titans like Khalid bin Walid and Ali, radiyallahu anhu, choosing instead to be mesmerized by Heraclius and Rustam, the legendary heroes of the Roman and Persian empires. To break this spell and remind the youth of their true Islamic heroes, a legendary Muslim caliph stepped forward to initiate a monumental task. His name was Umar bin Abdulaziz. The moment he assumed the caliphate, he summoned a titan of knowledge from that era, a scholar named Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, and issued a royal decree. Throughout my realm, travel to every corner and captivate the Muslims with lectures about the sublime life of Prophet Muhammad, PBUH. Now, during the reign of Umar bin Abdulaziz, only a handful of the final Sahaba were left on earth. So Ibn Shihab absorbed the sacred history directly from them, instantly passing that torch to his own students, ensuring that future generations would never forget these magnificent heroes. Remarkably, two of his brilliant students are immortalized globally today, Ibn Ishaq and Imam Malik. Following this, Ibn Shihab penned the absolute first book on Islamic history. Yet the moment he completed this masterpiece, Caliph Umar bin Abdulaziz was tragically martyred. And a mere 30 years after his martyrdom, the entire Umayyad dynasty collapsed into ruins. Along with the fall of the Umayyads, Ibn Shihab's pioneering book, the first ever written history of Islam, mysteriously vanished from the face of the earth. Though the Umayyad Caliphate evaporated from existence, a fierce new era dawned upon the world, the Abbasid Caliphate. The Abbasids possessed numerous flaws just like the Umayyads, but they harbored one undeniable virtue that no intellectual can ever dispute. They were madly obsessed with knowledge and enlightenment. They would go to unimaginable lengths to acquire it. To give you a taste of their obsession, an Abbasid emperor literally called off a colossal war against the Roman Empire in exchange for just a single rare manuscript of Plato. The Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur dismantled the old Umayyad capital and engineered a breathtaking new metropolis for the Muslim world, Baghdad. And deep within its heart, he erected the grandest library the world had ever seen, which later came to be known as Bait al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. Upon building this sanctuary, Caliph Mansur instantly summoned Ibn Ishaq, the legendary student of Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, and commanded him, "Go forth and rewrite the definitive history of Islam. But it must not be an ordinary text. It must encapsulate the entire chronicle of the world, spanning from Prophet Adam all the way down to me." Ibn Ishaq executed the order flawlessly, constructing the first ever comprehensive history of the Muslims. Mind you, this wasn't a book of hadith, but a pure chronological epic of history. But here is the twist. Today, even this critically important volume by Ibn Ishaq has vanished from the world. Now, the burning question is, why were all these priceless books continuously vanishing into thin air? The culprit was a technological limitation. Until then, Muslims had no concept of paper technology. These priceless chronicles were forced to be written on an incredibly rare and expensive ancient material called papyrus. Muslims had to painstakingly fuse these small, brittle leaves together, which was a nightmare compared to modern paper. During that era, the revolutionary technology of paper manufacturing existed in only one secretive corner of the globe, thousands of miles away from the Caliphate, Imperial China. And the Chinese emperors guarded this paper-making secret with their lives, hidden from the rest of humanity. But a seismic shift was on the horizon. Shortly after the rise of the Abbasids, a massive geopolitical clash ignited between the Muslim forces and the Chinese Empire, the Battle of Talas. In this fierce confrontation, the Muslim army completely crushed the Chinese forces, capturing thousands of imperial soldiers as prisoners of war. As destiny would have it, among these Chinese captives were elite artisans who held the classified secrets of paper manufacturing. Right there, the Muslims began extracting this game-changing technology from their Chinese prisoners. Initially, the broader Muslim world didn't fully grasp the earth-shattering importance of this craft. But then stepped in the most legendary Abbasid emperor of all time, Harun al-Rashid. He instantly envisioned the raw, unstoppable power of paper. Consequently, he established the world's grandest paper manufacturing factory right in the heart of Baghdad. And with that single move, a glorious epoch was born that humanity still talks about today: the Islamic Golden Age. Harun al-Rashid strategically built this massive paper mill right next to the House of Wisdom. Powered by hydraulic water machinery, it churned out thousands of premium sheets daily. This was an industrial marvel of the ancient world, so advanced that Europe failed to build its first paper mill until a staggering 300 years after the Muslims. Thanks to this explosion of paper technology, the agonizing fear of books vanishing forever evaporated instantly. Any masterpiece drafted inside the House of Wisdom was immediately sent to the bustling paper markets to be copied thousands of times and distributed worldwide. As a result, during the Islamic Golden Age, scholars everywhere unleashed a tidal wave of literature, much of which miraculously survives to this day. It is said that back then, intellectual scholars enjoyed the astronomical levels of fame and reverence that Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi command today. Cristiano Ronaldo! It was during this exact golden era that the 6 canonical books of Hadith, including Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim, were meticulously compiled. Yet a massive void still loomed large. Due to the disappearance of Ibn Ishaq's original work, there was no surviving complete chronicle of Islamic history. Witnessing this intellectual crisis, Ibn Ishaq's brilliant student Ibn Hisham stepped up to recreate the grand epic of Islamic history from scratch. And thanks to the durability of paper technology, Ibn Hisham's masterpiece rests safely in our hands today. In fact, you can easily grab a modern version of it anywhere. This stands as the oldest surviving book on Islamic history. Following Ibn Hisham, a golden wave of historical writing swept across the empire. The next major historical account was penned by al-Waqidi. This is Waqidi's book, though modern scholars view some of his narratives with skepticism. Right after, Waqidi's brilliant protege drafted his own monument of knowledge, Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, which brilliantly preserved the raw, inspiring biographies of all the Sahaba. And finally, during this glorious epoch, a book was forged that is impossible to miss if you have even a surface-level interest in Islamic history. That legendary manuscript is titled Tarikh al-Tabari. This is the mighty Tarikh al-Tabari, written by one of the absolute greatest intellectual titans of the Islamic Golden Age. He used to quietly teach students at a school in Baghdad for a humble salary of just 10 dinars. But as rumors of Imam Tabari's otherworldly intelligence spread, the school administration was so awestruck that they once presented him with a treasure chest overflowing with gold coins. Yet Imam Tabari picked up exactly 10 dinars and declared, "This is my earned salary. I shall not take a single penny more." Within this epic, Tabari chronicled human history from Prophet Adam all the way to the complex dynamics of the Abbasid Caliphate. Though numerous other scholars existed, we are focusing strictly on the titans who sculpted the masterworks of Islamic history. Tarikh al-Tabari marked the final grand masterpiece of the Abbasid era, because shortly after, the empire began fracturing and weakening from within. Eventually, the Muslims grew so fragile that the Pope of Europe seized the ultimate opportunity. Rallying the Christian armies of Europe, he launched a brutal assault on Muslim Palestine and conquered Jerusalem. Yet even after losing Palestine, the Muslim rulers of that time, shockingly similar to some modern leaders, showed absolute apathy and indifference. The burning desire to reconquer Palestine burned brighter in the hearts of scholars than it did in the palaces of kings. Among them stood the intellectual giant Imam Ibn Asakir, a scholar so staggeringly prolific that just one of his historical masterworks spans a breathtaking 70 volumes. From the grand mosques of Damascus, Imam Ibn Asakir taught the youth the deep philosophy of Islamic history, constantly whispering a prophecy into their ears. One day, the Muslims will undeniably reclaim Palestine. Amazingly, one of the young students sitting in those very lectures grew up to fulfill that exact prophecy. His name was Saladin Ayyubi. Walaikum assalam. Leading a roaring army of 200,000 warriors, he marched forth to liberate Palestine. By the way, while Saladin was marching towards Palestine, a bizarre and controversial book was published in Baghdad titled Fazail-e-Yazid, The Virtues of Yazid. This text audaciously painted Yazid as a supreme hero of Islam, projecting him as the epitome of righteousness. The book spread like wildfire, to the point where some oblivious Muslims actually began venerating Yazid as an Islamic icon. The moment this alarming news reached the greatest Sunni jurist of the era, Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, a cold fear struck him. the fear that future generations might forever mistake Yazid for a hero. Mobilizing his intellectual might, Imam Ibn al-Jawzi penned a massive, devastating critique that tore the propaganda apart, exposing Yazid's true character to the world forever. While this intellectual battle was being fought in the classrooms, Saladin Ayyubi finally liberated the Holy Land of Palestine. Allahu Akbar. He hoisted the flag of Islam over the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque, etching his name eternally into global history, the warrior, the creator. Riding alongside Saladin's liberating army was another spectacular scholar, Imam Ibn al-Athir. While wielding the sword, he simultaneously wielded the pen to draft a monumental historical encyclopedia. This is his masterwork, wherein he captured Saladin's glorious campaigns alongside the thrilling saga of the very first Muslim conqueror to establish a foothold in India, Sultan Shahabuddin Gauri. Under the era of Ibn al-Athir, Muslims were conquering horizons from Palestine to India. Yet at the absolute tail end of his book, a dark shadow falls over the narrative, marking the arrival of absolute doom for the Muslim world. The architect of this cataclysm was none other than Genghis Khan. Shortly after the era of Saladin Ayyubi, Genghis Khan erupted from Mongolia, sweeping into Muslim territories like a ruthless tidal wave, burning one magnificent Muslim city after another to ashes. Forging a path of absolute devastation, Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu Khan, eventually arrived at the crown jewel and center of the Islamic Golden Age, Baghdad. Historical accounts reveal that by this time, the Islamic Golden Age had decayed into intellectual bankruptcy. People had abandoned real science and cutting-edge knowledge, choosing instead to lock horns over absurd, trivial debates. Believe it or not, while Hulagu Khan's terrifying war machine was rapidly closing in on Baghdad, the Muslims inside the city walls were fiercely arguing over questions like, how many angels can fit on the tip of a single needle? And what specific type of bread did Prophet Jesus eat? And of course, the eternal toxic sectarian feuds between Shias and Sunnis. While the Muslims were completely paralyzed by these petty internal disputes, Hulagu Khan's ruthless hordes breached the gates of Baghdad. Blinded by rage, they didn't care who was Shia or who was Sunni. They viewed them all as Muslims and systematically slaughtered everyone in sight. It is documented that Hulagu Khan unleashed such an apocalyptic massacre in Baghdad that the waters of the mighty Tigris River turned completely crimson with Muslim blood for days on end. After wiping out the population, Hulagu Khan's army arrived at the gates of the world's ultimate library, the House of Wisdom. They set it ablaze, throwing millions of priceless books into the river. The sheer volume of knowledge destroyed was so immense that the ink from the drowning books overpowered the blood, turning the river from red to a deep ghostly black for days. Hulagu Khan then reduced Baghdad's legendary paper mills to ash. Just like that, the Islamic Golden Age was violently snuffed out, and 400 years of priceless Muslim research washed away into the dark waters of Baghdad. The Muslims were left so economically and intellectually crippled that their surviving scholars didn't even have paper to write on. For the first time in history, Muslims were forced to beg and import paper from Europe. This triggered an economic boom in Europe, launching their paper production into the stratosphere and allowing European Christians to manufacture far more paper than the entire Muslim world combined. Yet, amidst the haunting aura of despair left by the Mongol invasion, when the scientific and historical legacy of the Muslims lay in ruins, the ultimate masterpiece of Quranic exegesis and Islamic history was forged. Almost every single Muslim on earth recognizes its name, Tariq ibn Kathir. The actual title of this epic is Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, which translates to the beginning and the end. Within these pages, he mapped human destiny in breathtaking detail, from Prophet Adam all the way to the end of time. Following Ibn Kathir, another intellectual titan emerged to write a masterpiece on history. He is widely considered by historians to be the final great social scientist of the Muslim world, Allama ibn Khaldun, and this is his iconic book. The introductory volume of this very text, the Muqaddimah, is so revolutionary that it is mandatory reading at Ivy League institutions like Harvard and Oxford to this day. In fact, a massive modern university stands in Turkey today, proudly bearing Ibn Khaldun's name. Many modern scholars view him as the final grand intellectual of the Islamic world, because by the time of his passing, the undisputed monopoly on paper and knowledge had shifted completely from the Muslims to the Christians of Europe. In the exact year that Ibn Khaldun took his final breath, a man named Johannes Gutenberg was born in Europe. He invented a mechanical contraption that would fundamentally alter human civilization forever, the printing press. This spark allowed Europe to rapidly manufacture millions of books. The printing press was an absolute beast of a machine, where a master human calligrapher could painstakingly write only 40 pages a day. Gutenberg's machine could effortlessly print 4,000 pages every single day. Consequently, Europe began leaving the Muslim world in its dust. Yet during this dawn of the printing press, a ferocious new superpower had risen in the Muslim world, the Ottoman Empire, Usmania Sultanate. And the Ottomans made a fateful decision that historians look back on as the absolute greatest blunder in Islamic history. The Ottoman sultans and the religious establishment collectively issued an extraordinary imperial decree. The mechanical printing press is strictly haram, forbidden for Muslims. Their reasoning? Some scholars argued that sacred knowledge can only be captured by the human hand and pen, not by cold machines. Others dismissed it blindly as a Christian invention that must be shunned. And a few elitist scholars secretly feared that if every ordinary Muslim got their hands on books, they would lose their religious monopoly and power over the masses. Whatever the motives, the catastrophic result was that while Europe weaponized its society with over 1,000 active printing presses, the Muslim world possessed exactly zero. A Muslim scholar was still stuck printing 40 pages a day by hand, while a European Christian was blasting out 4,000 pages a day mechanically. Inevitably, this became the precise turning point where the glorious decline of the Muslims accelerated, and Europe soared into the heavens. While Muslims abandoned science and knowledge to build hollow vanity monuments like the Taj Mahal, Europe spent its wealth building world-class universities and massive public libraries. Consequently, instead of producing geniuses like Ibn Khaldun or Al-Biruni, the greatest scientific minds began emerging exclusively from Europe. Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, Isaac Newton. A staggering 300 years after Europe had embraced the printing press, the Ottoman Empire finally woke up from its slumber and realized the catastrophic magnitude of their mistake. They finally built their first printing press, but the wheels of time had already turned too far. The damage was irreversible, and to this day the Muslim world has never been able to hold its head high above Europe again.